I'm Thomas Mills with Politics NC, and we have the latest edition of Restless Natives NC with our guests, Anderson Clayton, chair of the North Carolina Democratic Party, and Travis Fain, former journalist and political analyst extraordinaire today. And we're going to start by talking about ICE raids. Over the last week or so in North Carolina, ICE has been in the state. They've been rough with a lot of citizens. They've been rough with maybe some bad guys. But the reality of it is they've come into mainly urban areas and they are arresting people, and it's caused a bit of disturbance. Travis, you want to give us a rundown on what they're doing here and why they're in the state?
Yeah, I mean, and this is Border Patrol as opposed to ICE. I mean, in some ways, that's a distinction without a difference. But I do think they're different branches. And they've had some targeted actions in Charlotte and in the Triangle this week as part of kind of a mass deportation effort that the Trump administration is undertaking. And I'll give some details, but I also kind of want to try to open a window for people without preaching too much to the choir. So I live in a part of Cary, North Carolina, that is really diverse. A lot of Hispanic folks, a lot of Asian people. I live near some trailer parks. My kids' school has lots of kids who are immigrants from immigrant. We love it here. Restaurants that are great that people don't necessarily speak a lot of English in them. That's part of it for me. I like that. It's awesome here. Tuesday and Wednesday, just restaurants and small grocery stores closed. There was just this feeling of fear there. You could feel it. There was just this unease. My daughter told me that one of her teachers was just in tears because a lot of kids didn't show up for school. And you don't really know when you're a teacher, well, what does that mean? My daughter asked my wife, who was born in the Dominican Republic, grew up in New York, and has been a naturalized citizen for, I'm sure, more of her life than she hasn't been. My daughter didn't want her to go out just because of fear. Now, how valid is that fear? Questionable. But we have seen people in masks who appear to be federal agents taking people. It's clear that they're stopping people because of what they look like or maybe where they're going. And what I want people to understand is that the uneasiness has been very, very real. And it's not just among people who might be in the country illegally, but I'll also talk a little bit about scope. And this is something I talked to my daughter about. The latest stats that I saw, I haven't seen arrest figures for the Triangle area, but in Charlotte, the latest figures I saw was that 250 people were arrested, were taken in this. And as I told my daughter, there are 1.1 million people in Charlotte, Mecklenburg. So I do want us to kind of understand the level of risk that we're talking about here for people. 8,000 kids on one day in Charlotte miss school. On a normal day, it's like 10,000. So, I mean, that's a big jump. And I've seen too many people who were saying, well, they're illegal, good. And that callousness that is at the root of this, even if you believe, as I think is very reasonable to believe, that we have a broken immigration system and we need to better secure our border, and maybe we do need to deport people in some significant numbers, even if you do believe that, to not feel sadness at the individual human tragedies of families being split up. There's a woman in Wendell, 20-something, came here from Honduras at 14. No criminal record, seems to be just a good member of society. Family don't know where she is. There's video of agents taking her, and then now the family just doesn't know where she is. Apparently she was in the New Hanover County Jail at some point. So we're very blessed, to live in this country. And I just cannot, as a Christian, as a human being, say, well, I deserve this life. You don't, because you did not go through the proper channels to come here. So it's sad to see people who are gleeful about what's happening. And I think that's where I've landed on this, is I am sad that this makes some people happy.
Anderson, you got any thoughts about it?
I mean, I don't think that Travis didn't very eloquently say, except for the fact that I'm like, these are masked federal agents coming into communities and stealing people off the streets that are US citizens. And out of the 600 people, a CNN report had it out last week, out of the 600 people that they detained right in Chicago, 2% of them were violent criminals. And every federal prosecutor that was there under a Biden administration that I have spoken to since all of this has gone on has said the same thing. This does not help protect communities. In fact, it makes people less safe by taking resources away from actual operations that are supposed to be getting rid of violent criminals, gang-related activity, and people that are crossing the border illegally. Because what I've seen, I mean, we're seeing people at the Charlotte Country Club, right, go in and detain legal employees who do not look like, right, they are U.S. citizens, which according to Republicans and Donald Trump and this administration right now, if you do not look the way that all three of us do on this call at this moment in time, you maybe should not be in the United States and do not belong in the United States. And we're going to question whether or not you're able to be here. And we're going to make you feel the fear of carrying around papers everywhere you go. And to Travis's point, the thing that's pissed me off so badly is that people have said, well, if you're here legally, you should just be able to answer the question. And I was like, I don't give a fuck whether or not I don't think that anybody wants to be walked up to in a grocery store parking lot with people that are armed in masked like uniforms that you cannot verify if they are part of a federal government or if they are not, asking you, I want to see your papers. I want you to prove to me that you're a US citizen. And it's like, private property rights right now are being threatened. You have people, to me, like the foundations of personal freedoms that the Republican Party, in my opinion, as long as I have been alive, has stood for in some ways. When you see Reba Hamilton was the woman, the viral video that came out of Charlotte, like the first one that we really saw of, she had workers in her yard putting up Christmas tree lights because her and her husband are elderly and they're not able to get up on a ladder anymore and do it. And these folks, like Border Patrol rolls up in a minivan. The minivan doesn't even stop and they hop out and they start questioning these folks. And Reba's like, why are you on my property without any warrant to be on here? You've not acknowledged yourself or recognized yourself for who you are. And to me, it's like you are seeing the encroachment of not just like the rights and liberties that you have based on the U.S. Constitution, but also ones that have been guaranteed to us through every other form of federal laws that are supposed to protect people. And I hope to God everybody is questioning right now, if they're willing to take it this far with this, what else are they willing to do? And who else are they willing to do it to? Because I believe that should be the question everywhere. If they decide that you are, I go back to private property rights so much because I think about how many Republicans in my backyard have been like, it's our land and what we do on it, we should be able to do on it. And so a little bit of this to me is like, well, why don't we feel that way about every other federal force right now? But that's really, that's like a side item of just everything else Travis said. I think I've been crying all over the internet this week of just being upset about what you're seeing because I think it's horrific and I don't really care about somebody's documented status to be able to say that out loud of like kids being ripped away from their families and questioning whether or not they're going to see their folks when they go home at night. And to Travis's point, like in Wake County, 1 out of every 9 students today were missing from classes like this week. And it breaks your heart, I think, or at least it should.
Well, to me, there are a number of political problems with this. One is this is what Donald Trump wants. He wanted this all along. I feel like a lot of this is performative. He could come in here and he could go get the violent criminals that they claimed they were going after, and they could extract them and remove them from society, and nobody would say a thing. But instead, they're coming into the communities and they're grabbing people not because of what they have done, but because of what they look like. The guy in Charlotte who was sitting in his truck, who was a U.S. citizen, he gets questioned twice by ICE before they bust his window, drag him out of the truck, throw him on the ground, and then stick him in a van and haul him off. I saw another episode of kids or workers in Cary that were working construction, and they came by and they grabbed the kids, they threw them in the van, or grabbed one of the kids, threw him in the van, hauled him off, found out he was a U.S. citizen, threw his wallet out the window, and then put him out of the van and made him walk back to find his wallet and go back to work. These are U.S. citizens that they're doing this to.
Well,
So
that's
there's
why
a
they're telling
problem there.
people not to carry your actual documentation because they're like, you don't know that these folks are not going to, like, the people that are picking you up, Border Patrol is not just going to throw away your, like, it's not even that you could actually prove that helping or that having a piece of paper that says, yes, I'm here legally helps you right now. It actually is just whether or not and how that person who arrests you is feeling that particular day. And I don't know about y'all, but I don't think that whether or not you end up living or breathing that day should be left up to somebody's human emotions at the end of it.
Well, we have a Fourth Amendment that against illegal search and seizure, and we have a 14th Amendment that says equal protection under the law. And between the two of those, it looks to me like these, I guess, are Border Patrol agents are violating it. The other problem I have with it is what in the world is this with these camouflage things? I mean, who are these people? They're confusing. They are intentionally looking like a military operation. My whole life, I grew up and we had police and we had various levels of police. We had deputy sheriffs, we had state highway patrol, we had local police. None of them wore camouflage. Police wore blue. The whole saying is the blue, back the blue. These guys aren't wearing blue. They're wearing camouflage. They're not in the jungles of Vietnam right now. These are cosplaying people. They like looking like they're being that they're military folks. And the idea that you believe that it's positive for the military to be wandering around our streets is a little bit gross. You know, it's like I believe in police. And look, I also understand that we have a problem with immigration. And I feel like the Democrats have botched some of that on their own in the way they've handled it. But the reality of it is Republicans have killed any comprehensive immigration reform measure and left it up to the executive branch. They killed it under George W. Bush, put together a compromise program that Republicans then killed themselves back in the 2006, 2007 era. Just a year ago, a little over a year ago, James Lankford, a Republican senator, spent 2 years working on a compromise measure to fix our broken immigration system, and Trump told the Republicans to vote against it. And you know why? Because he wanted what we have now.
It was last year that he
That was
wanted the
last
campaign
year.
issue.
There was another time in the teens where Republicans also tanked a measure to fix our immigration system. So yeah, we've had a broken immigration system for a long time. The problem is Republicans like it broken. They believe that all this performative stuff juices their base. And I think this time they may have misjudged the public, because I don't think most people, even if they believe that we need to fix our immigration reform, our immigration system, even if they believe that people who are here, who are undocumented and here illegally, need to go home, they do not believe that we need to have masked people, masked men with guns, catching people off the street and intimidating entire communities. And I believe firmly that the goal of this whole operation is to intimidate people, not really fix the immigration problem. I think there's somewhere around 11 or 12 million undocumented people in the country right now, and they got 200 out of Charlotte. You're not making a dent in it. What they're trying to do is scare people out of the country.
Right, that's clearly the plan because it's the only way they're gonna hit their numbers, right?
Right.
Which just kinda puts the lie to this idea of, "Oh, well, we're picking up people who are violent criminals or who are dangerous." They may pick some of those up, and I think, as you said earlier, everybody supports that. But the idea is clearly to instill a culture of fear, hope people will self-deport,
Oh, yeah.
hope people will get rounded up and sent away, and I think that's gonna have lasting effects on our economy. I saw a piece from the Carolinas Associated General Contractors, I believe just this morning, basically saying, "We expect construction delays because of this action in the Triangle this week. We expect weeks of delays on construction projects because of it." I mean, we clearly our workforce clearly depends to some extent on undocumented labor. It's just you cannot escape that fact.
You
But
froze
it's
up.
not just undocumented labor. Like half of the reason why people are staying home is
Uh,
Travis to the point that your daughter made to your wife, right? Which is the fact that they are scared because it's not just people that are here illegally that are getting deported. It is or getting arrested and getting rounded up. It is people that are US citizens that again do not look the way that we all three do. And I do not think that we can talk about this without saying like it is racial profiling, right? That is happening from agents that have been empowered by a federal administration to do that. And I think in every way, shape, and form, we're seeing that play out. And I go back to the whole thing of I think everybody can agree right now we need to fix our immigration system, that things are broken. But I wish that this administration had actually started with policy proposals to do that rather than coming into the streets of Charlotte and rounding people up. Because I think that everybody can agree it shouldn't take you 7 years to become or know that you're going to be a US citizen, right? It shouldn't take you forever to know whether or not you're going to actually be able to come into this country legally. It's something where, like, we have a system that needs fixing, and Republicans have every opportunity right now and every power right now to be able to fix it.
It shouldn't be unobtainable to immigrate legally. And we can make it much better. And you know, the fear that's kind of used to justify these things, we've seen Republican Congressman Tim Moore, Pat Harrigan, Mark Harris talk about Charlotte like it is some sort of hellscape. You know, they've called for the National Guard to be empowered to work in
It's
Charlotte. They've
surprising they'd want to represent it, isn't it, Travis? With the way that
well,
they're painting it, right? I mean, dear God, it seems like they hate their backyard, doesn't it?
I'm not sure that any of those guys actually do represent a part of Charlotte. I'd have to look at the map. But you know,
And Tim Moore prides himself in that 14th district now. Come on, it's got a little part of Mecklenburg County in it. I'm like, no, 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 no. I said, wait a minute. You hate where the congressional district you drew for yourself? You hate the people there? Timmy boy, Timmy boy.
well, and the broader economic trends tell you that Charlotte ain't nothing to be afraid of. We saw just this week Scout, which is part of Volkswagen, and they make our electric cars. They're going to make them in Charlotte. Excuse me, they're going to make them in South Carolina. South Carolina's mad because they said they're going to put their headquarters in Charlotte. Maersk, which is the shipping
Yeah.
company,
right.
they're moving, I believe their headquarters are a headquarters to Charlotte. I mean, Charlotte is an economic powerhouse where
Mm-hmm.
people who have lots of choices about where they live, about where they start their businesses, about where they move their white collar businesses to. And they're picking Charlotte. This idea that it is so significantly more dangerous than other places that the National Guard needs to be called out, it just seems to me like a farce.
No, the number one state for business is also apparently the number one state that you want to be targeting like your workforce in. I think Donald Trump's picking a fight with the wrong people, in my personal opinion, of like where he is going with this. I
He
also
needs to
think
be down in Robeson County. He needs to
look,
go, you
Thomas,
know,
they're there too. Honestly to God, they're picking up Native Americans. That's what the Navajo has already said it. Like they are literally picking up anybody who fits a certain type of profile, right? And black or brown in this country at this moment in time, the federal government's coming for your ass. It's just what they've told people. I'm like, it is frightening to me, but it is also wild to be able to see that because they didn't get Thomas, to your point, right? What they wanted to see, they wanted to see riots in the street. They wanted to paint Charlotte in a certain way. And I'm like, you're coming to the second largest financial capital in the country, like what in the world? You know what I mean? Like, what are you expecting out of uptown in some
right.
aspects?
Well, I do believe that this is contributing to a really bad political environment for Republicans because, you know, one of the things that they keep Donald Trump keeps trying to tell everybody how great the economy is. And there's an article I saw this morning saying you can't really convince people that the economy is going great for them when they're the ones having to pay record high prices for groceries right now. I just saw where the average cost of groceries for a family of four is now over $1,000 a month. It's
But
never been
Thomas, he's
that
going
high.
to give us a stimulus check. He's going to come back with
It's $2,000. That's right.
with another tariff vote. What do you mean? Donald
Yeah,
Trump's going to fix it. Don't you know that?
right. And trust me, there are far too many people who believe that. But it's never going to come. And I just feel like that all of this stuff is causing a really poor political environment for them. You know, one of the things, and back to kind of the affordability thing, they're not going into rural communities because the backbone of a lot of the workforce, the kind of lower paid agricultural workforce in these rural counties is probably migrant labor and Hispanic, a lot of them undocumented labor. And if you start doing that, the food prices are really going to start jumping. And
I don't
I just feel like
I don't
all of
know
this is
I don't know, Thomas. I mean, like, at least if you go on, Siembra, North Carolina is an organization in the state that has been following Border Patrol and ICE. For any of you all listening to this that maybe do not know, ojonc.com is a place where you can go and see ICE reportings and Border Patrol reportings across the state right now. And I mean, I have been surprised because I have been hearing and I've seen reports coming out of almost every county across North Carolina of that at least a sighting near or somewhere surrounding. And I mean, today when I'm getting reports of like they're in Greenville, they're in New Bern, they're in Lenoir, they're in Linville, they're in. I mean, it was just like I would love to say like, and not love to, but I would love to be like they're targeting Democratic cities in North Carolina for a reason in that sense too. But honestly, to God, they're targeting everywhere, and that to me is also going to hurt because even though people, I think, feel like rural communities think a certain type of way about immigration, it's like, wait until you pick up somebody who's a pillar of that community, and you will at one point in time find yourself in that situation. And we saw that in other states where this has happened in too, of that, we take care of our own. And as far as I know, the South does not take too kindly, in my opinion, from our history of federal agents coming into our states. But, who
yeah,
knows?
that's right. That's right. Well, it's been a difficult week for a lot of people in North Carolina. And Anderson, where have you been this week? What have you been doing? What are you hearing? Have you been in other parts of the country a little bit, right?
Yeah, we've been doing fundraising hauls. I'm not going to lie to nobody. We've been in Colorado, in Texas, and in DC. So I just got back. For anybody who knows Austin and is familiar with the Texas Tribune, I got to go down there and do a panel for them on the Texas Trib Fest, which was really, really neat.
Good.
And I got to meet some phenomenal folks who are helping fund journalism throughout the country, which to me, it's exciting to meet people that are trying to still give a nonpartisan viewpoint on what's happening in the world and just telling the truth as it is. And it was cool to be able to thank some of those folks in person. Even if I'm like, man, you might not do me a solid all the time, but I still believe in you and I appreciate independent journalism. So it was really cool. And I like seeing that in person, to be honest.
Good.
Texas Tribune is a good outlet. They
It's a
do a
great
lot of really
outlet.
good work.
I learned a lot about the history of and I also got to go down there and go to the LBJ school. So I did like a panel with their women's institute, their women's like campaign school. So Park Inglefield, who we had go and or try to become our Hickory mayor this year, she lost by about 300 votes. So we're looking for her to run again and hopefully become the first woman mayor of Hickory in our next couple of years. But she was one of the folks that went through their program and everything. And it was cool, to be honest with y'all, to be in Texas, to be at the LBJ school, and also be a rural Democrat. I sat there and I was like, wow, this is my type of Democratic Party right here. In so many ways, I got to go tour the museum and stuff, and it reminded me a lot about like why I believe in the Democratic Party too, is he was just like opportunity everywhere. Everybody should be able to have access to an education. And I was just like, yeah, like that's what our party's foundational principles are: fighting injustice and having access to education. And I think those are two damn good ones in my opinion.
Well, Travis, you got any thoughts about anything in particular this week?
I want to talk about two things. I want to talk about return on equity for monopoly utilities, and then I'd love to talk a little bit more about affordability as a group. But I want to the kind of my story of the week for people. There's a piece in Heat Map, HEATMAP, which is a really good energy publication if you're interested in those things. And the headline along the lines is, why don't utilities just make less money? Which, some people are going to agree with, and some people who work for utilities are going to be like, oh, I don't like that.
That's a
But it
thought.
does a good job of explaining return on equity, which in North Carolina, here's how it works more or less. I'm not going to hit this exactly right, but this is essentially how it works. So Duke Energy is a regulated monopoly. We allow them to be a monopoly because it's, basically we don't want 6 companies to have wires going down the street. That doesn't make any sense. And it's really important that the power come on, and Duke Energy does a good job of that. So they are allowed a certain rate of return. So when they build a capital project like a gas plant, for example, if the gas plant is 2 billion, they're allowed 10% of that as a return. It's essentially profit, but we don't call it profit. We call it return on equity. It's to not quite guarantee, but essentially guarantee that there will be a return on this. But what it does is it makes you think, if you're a Duke Energy executive, I should build something really expensive because we get 10% of that back. I can hear the Duke Energy people taking issue with that, but that's essentially the thinking. So anyway, the heat map story talks about how there's this growing movement to lower the return on equity because electricity is getting so expensive around the country. And it points out that the reason we have these return on equity rules is because you want to properly reflect the amount of risk that it takes in order to do these big projects. And we've gotten out of whack on that. So according to this story, there was a 2019 paper by Carnegie Mellon researchers, and they found that the risk premium has basically, compared to risk-free U.S. Treasury bonds, utility investments have gotten less risky over the years. So we just basically don't need to guarantee this 10%. And it's big money. I'm gonna read to you from the Carnegie Mellon thing, and I realize I'm talking and talking as opposed to just people reading things. That's easier. Quote, an error or bias of merely 1 percentage point in the allowed return would imply tens of billions of dollars in additional cost for ratepayers in the form of higher retail power prices. So that ain't me saying utility companies should make less money. That is Carnegie Mellon. Something to think about, something for people to look at more closely and do their own research on.
My
Watch out about
reminder that
people doing their own research. Man.
my reminder that Duke Energy also paid $100,000 this year to the Republican Party's building fund in order to either do one of two things: raise your energy rates or steal an election. Whichever two, I'm all for holding monopolies accountable at this moment in time. And I actually believe that we shouldn't be having any sort of subsidies for a monopoly to be able to do more monopolizing in that sense too. Because yes, we don't maybe want six different companies on a pole, but what about a public option? What about a public option? One of those and a private company somewhere in between, and each one of them hold each other accountable. I don't know. The ideas that we have as humans.
I'm not against the idea of a well-regulated monopoly, but I do think it's, and the Utilities Commission does review this on a pretty consistent
Who
schedule.
appoints
But
the Utilities Commission though now, Travis?
well, it used to be the governor, and then the General Assembly didn't like that, and so now it's the General Assembly. So it's the Republican
Say,
controlled General Assembly.
you know what? I'm for a
Wait, you think that's connected?
Look, I'm for a well-regulated monopoly too. I'm actually not, but just for the sake of this argument, right? Sure, when the well-regulated monopoly cannot go out there and buy from every other branch of government, right? The ability to keep, again, monopolizing. It is just, it's all cyclical up in here
Right, and
together.
let's make sure to be clear that the $100,000 to the Republican Building Fund, that is not the only donation that Duke Energy made, and we will never know all the donations that Duke Energy made to essentially political causes because of dark money, which everybody understands is often the bigger portion of political influence in our form of government.
Which, if this Democratic Party chair could go on record right now and say, end big money in politics, let's reform campaign finance, let us do the things that we need to. And Republicans in North Carolina could do that at any point in time if they wanted to. If they were about letting the people actually speak in this state, they would take on campaign finance reform, I think, as a party right now. Because that's not a partisan issue. It's saying, hey, we actually believe that people should not be able to buy elections. And I think everybody should be able to get on board with it.
And maybe that's a topic for another. We can do a whole podcast about that. But just to talk a little bit more about energy and affordability. So I'm looking at a report from the Century Foundation that found monthly energy bills, and this is nationally, rose 35% from early 2022 to this past summer. So 35% in your energy bills. And the average, Obviously, that has knock-on effects and other things are increasing too, but the average late balance on bills, this group found, has increased by nearly a third. So debt is going up for people. I'm looking at a Goldman Sachs report that says in order to catch up with our lack of affordable housing in this country, we would need to build 3 to 4 million homes beyond normal construction. So 3 to 4 million beyond what we would normally expect. The home price to income ratio has, quote, surpassed the peak it reached in the 2000s housing boom, according to Goldman Sachs. Mortgage rates, 20-year high in 2022, and have gone up from there. So we're beyond a 20-year high in mortgage rates. The average mortgage monthly payment as a share of a potential home buyer's income has risen from less than 20% to more than 30% since 2022. We've got all these blinking lights about our economy where people are taking on more debt, things are less affordable. The boomer generation has $85 trillion in assets, according to the Washington Post, because they were able to buy in earlier. Elon Musk is about to make $100 billion a year. I saw a piece where Kristi Noem, is she the Interior DHHS secretary? What is Kristi
Yep.
Noem's job in the
She's
Trump?
DHA.
So immigration is such an important issue to them that they spent $220 million on an ad campaign starring her, where it seems like she has some ties, or people in her orbit have ties to the ad makers. $220 million to run commercials, lots of them on Fox News, about the importance of getting illegal immigrants out of this country. Who in their right mind thinks we need an ad blitz on this and it needs to cost $220 million? Also saw a New York Times piece about how the alternative minimum tax is being gutted by the Trump administration's IRS. And it just, I don't know. I'm frightened by people who don't see it kind of situation where I do not think the Trump administration generally has your best financial issues at heart as we are kind of rocketing toward economic problems that I think could ultimately be national and worldwide in scope.
Right. And today they say that in August, we got the August jobs report today because we're not going to get a September jobs report because they couldn't collect the data in October, but uh, unemployment's as high as it's been since 2021 after the recession, after the pandemic ended. There are a lot of worrying signs out there about what's going on, and they're worried. They're focused on the wrong things. They're focused on immigration. The one thing that really does bother me, though, is the amount of corruption in this government is staggering, and there's such a fire hose of outrage. The Epstein files, the immigration stuff, that nobody's paying attention to this. I mean, these guys are literally making billions of dollars off of crypto. He's selling pardons, to people who can benefit him financially. And it's just not really getting any coverage. It's not really resonating with anywhere. In a different time, this would have brought the presidency down, and now it's kind of a shrug.
I think it's getting coverage. I think there's so much of it that it is kind of a shrug ultimately. And just
It's also
people don't know how to hold people accountable. Like they just don't know what to do, I think.
And this is where what we do, we make a list. And honestly, I think that's why. If y'all want to know my hot take about why Border Patrol agents are masked right now and why they are afraid to show their faces, is because all of them know that they are committing crimes and they are committing atrocities against U.S. citizens. And that one day, when we are back in power as a party in this country, there will be a long list of people that come before a Senate Judiciary Committee. And in my personal opinion, they should all be brought with the full prospects of the law to their knees and sued, in my personal opinion, for every single atrocity that they are doing right now. And that means from the people that are on the streets in Charlotte, putting out the mission in that self, or whatever, executing whatever Gregory Bovino is telling them to in that sense, or the people that are sitting in Washington, D.C. right now. And I think you need a list of people that are going to be held accountable, because otherwise folks think that there is no accountability and that there is no recourse, that there is nothing that's going to happen to them if if they do and they continue to perpetuate what they are right now. And that sounds bad. I'll fully admit that too, in the sense of like I'm making a list and I'm checking it twice like Santa Claus in some way. But I am. And that's exactly what I think North Carolina needs to have, a list of people that we are going to hold accountable when Democrats get back in a position of power. Because in my opinion, in the 90s, that's what we had from the media. Because you had a flourishing and like honestly a well-funded, right, press that was able to do their job in an independent way to hold government accountable. And in my opinion, like we've got to hold our own accountable, but we also have to hold everybody else accountable too. And I don't see how you do that without documenting what is going wrong right now, which is why I think federal lawsuits and state lawsuits are so important, because I'm like, I want the list. I want the list of people that we need to go back and find and everything they have done written down somewhere. Because I am somebody that believes a little bit in the fact that we need political accountability in this state more so than what we have at this moment. And I'm trying every Republican that got something from a bill, a budget, anywhere that has personally benefited them. I mean, I want to go down the line of like, where is my Lena Khan right now saying, hey, Anderson, here is every person that has ever broken the law in the state at this moment, and here's what you should be doing about it. In some sense. So if you're out there, if you're the North Carolina version of that, come find me. I would love to talk to you.
I
That's what
think
I
just
got.
be careful about the line between accountability and revenge. And I know you know that, Anderson, but
That's why I didn't say, Travis, my words, I'll be honest with you, political retribution almost was what came out of my mouth, and it was not. I said, actually, there is a difference between retribution and accountability. And I think that, like, you have to hold that line. But I do think we are seeing people actively take advantage of government. And until government is able to show the public that we are willing to hold people accountable for that, people don't believe in government and they don't believe it works for them. And I'm like, we have a job to do, in my opinion, of making people believe in a system again that is right now set up to help people evade it in some sense.
I hope that we get back to a world where people want to see accountability and we can start to build some trust in some institutions. And I think really that's what worries me about what we're seeing with what Trump and these folks are doing. Are they creating a new baseline for government? And you know, I'm a strong Democrat, and I think we'll be in better shape with Democrats in power. I'm also aware that corruption really goes both ways. The people who are mostly corrupt are, it's a personality trait. And what we've done is we've allowed a guy who is morally ambiguous or morally bankrupt into the presidency of the United States, and he surrounded himself with people who are too. What we need is as we need to figure out how do we convince people that when Democrats are trying to hold people accountable, that the accountability is attached to good government. And again, to your point, not about retribution. And because Trump is clearly using the government. That's the other part of the corruption. He's using government to go after his political enemies. And I did see some information that says most people believe that right now, that he's using the government, the powers of the Justice Department for political gain, not for the best interest of the country. So, but we've got to be careful. Somehow we got to get out of a cycle of voting against. And we've really been in this cycle for a long time where, that's why we see these huge swings, is that they get mad and they go vote against. They don't really have nobody has convinced them that we have their best interest in mind. And they go in there and they go, well, what Trump's doing right now is disgusting them. And I believe 2026 is going to be a very, very good year for Democrats. They need to take advantage of that very, very good year to build trust. So when they run in 2028, that they get people that are, at least a good portion of them, who are less political than those of us probably sitting here and listening to this podcast, are listening to Democrats and saying, well, that's really what I want to hear. And I want to hear about accountability. So that's kind of where I fall on this stuff. And I think, back to your affordability stuff, again, all of this is contributing to what I believe is this really bad political environment, is that Trump came into office promising people that he was going to fix rising prices on day one. And we're now a year into him being elected, almost a year since he took office, and they hadn't dealt with it. Instead, we've dealt with all these other distractions. People are still feeling it, and they feel like they got hoodwinked. Anyhow, we're getting to the end of our time. I want to go through one more thing that has to do with these raids by the Border Patrol folks, and that's these masks. You know, nobody likes masked men coming into into their communities. In fact, people like masks so little. North Carolina had a mask law for many years, and it was instituted in the early part of the 20th century to combat two different things. One is it started out there were criminals in towns that were using masks, and they banned them to prevent people from coming in and robbing stores. The next thing was the Ku Klux Klan, and they used the mask laws to try to combat vigilantism that had become rampant during the 1920s and even into the 1930s. And just about 3 years ago, the North Carolina Republicans in the General Assembly passed a law banning people from wearing masks in North Carolina in public. If the North Carolina General Assembly passed that law, then they need to call the people at Border Patrol and tell them that they can't be wearing masks in North Carolina. And I had an attorney who sent me a letter who said that he had already requested that the governor and the attorney general start informing local law enforcement and DA's offices that it is illegal for these people to be in public spaces wearing masks with very narrow exceptions, one of those being for health reasons, but there aren't a ton of exceptions to that. So if they're going to come into North Carolina and we're going to stand up for our state's rights, the Republicans who passed that law need to be speaking out. They either need to admit that they passed that law to stub their nose, Democrats who were wearing masks during COVID, or that they were serious about it. It's one of the two. They can't have it both ways. Either we need not have masks, the law that they passed, or that law was nothing meant except to target a certain group of North Carolinians. And, if we're going to have laws on the books, as the Republicans like to tell us over and over, if we're going to have laws on the books, they need to be enforced. Let's enforce these laws. Let's tell these people who come into our state from other places and jerk our citizens off the streets, haul them off in vans, basically violate their rights, that if they're here, we got to know who they are. For the same reason that we need to have strong immigration laws, for the same reason we need to know who's coming into this country, we need to know who's coming into our states. We need to know if that guy dragging people into a van is actually working for the police or whether he's got some badge and that they're really just assaulting people, because we don't know, and we don't have their faces to tell us.
Yep.
So that's kind of my rant. If you're going to pass a law banning masks, enforce the law banning masks. If not, repeal the law.
Man, I forgot politics is so much in North Carolina. I forgot that the legislature had said, and it was due to COVID, them saying you cannot wear a mask in public basically anymore, and tried to ban masks in schools and everywhere else. That is crazy, Thomas Mills, that we had forgotten that piece of this history right now in some ways.
Well,
I wish I've been talking about it for 2 weeks now, truly too. Damn.
Not only did they pass that law, Governor Cooper vetoed it, and they overrode his veto. So if they're that
I was like,
serious,
how do I forget that?
If they're that serious about this law that they overrode the governor's veto, then they should be putting pressure on law enforcement to enforce the law.
All up over that. You clip that, put that on the internet, spread it around like butter on toast. I think that is so good. That is so good, Thomas Mills. It's so good.
So they tried to pass it. They tried to pass it without the exception for health care.
You ought to get on WRAL and say that. Which one? Who listens? Who's out there? Andy, do you listen to this? You listen to this podcast one of these days? What reporter can get Thomas Mills on a real news station to say that out loud? I need that. I need that in my life.
Well,
And please make it Kelly. Kelly, if State Lines, any of the producers for State Lines is listening to this, I need Thomas Mills up there with 2 Republicans, please, on a panel. Let him have a mic. This will make me so happy.
They won't put me on panels with the Republicans anymore.
I'm gonna tell you what, they've got so they might not be either, Thomas, but, like, that'd be good. What would they say? What
Would
would
I would
you be
I
like,
would gladly go on I would gladly go on panels with Republicans anytime, anywhere. I mean, at this point,
"You heard it here first,
you
folks."
know, they yeah, these are people who they have lost their moral compasses. They are now being dictated by a single man in the White House, and it's the most pathetic thing I've ever seen in my entire life, and I got no sympathy for any of them, for anything that happens to them politically. So, I guess on that, I should probably end. Well, folks, we really appreciate you taking time to listen. This is Thomas Mills, and I'm signing off for Politics NC.